My name is Claire Whitmore, and I'm 34 years old. I was born with a mild form of cerebral palsy that affects my right leg and arm. It doesn't define me, but for most of my life, other people acted like it should. They saw the limp before they saw the person. They heard the slight slur in my voice and assumed I was slow, broken, or weak. But I've never been weak. I've been quiet, observant, patient. If you've ever felt humiliated for something you can't control, if you've ever been underestimated, mocked, or pushed aside just because you didn't fit the mold, then this story is for you. Before we begin, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribed. Not because I'm chasing numbers, but because stories like mine matter. And maybe, just maybe, someone else out there needs to hear that they're not alone. Because sometimes, revenge doesn't need to shout to be heard. People didn't notice me for the right reasons in school. I was that girl. The one who walked funny. The one with the brace on her right leg. The one who slurred certain words when she got tired. My teachers knew my name because they had to. The other kids didn't bother learning it until they needed a target they knew wouldn't fight back. From first grade through senior year, I sat at the far edge of the cafeteria. Not because I liked it there, but because that's where people stopped looking. I wasn't born bitter. That came later. In elementary school, I still believed in the best of people. I'd smile at other kids in the hallway, try to wave even when my hand didn't quite move the way I wanted it to. But when you smile and no one smiles back, eventually your face forgets how to do it right. That's how I got the nickname. Crooked Smile. It started with a boy named Tyler in 4th grade. I had a small accident in gym. My leg gave out mid-run during a game of tag, and I fell hard on the pavement. I scraped my chin, and my mouth swelled a bit. I didn't cry. I never did. But when I came back to class with gauze on my lip and a Band-Aid on my cheek, Tyler squinted at me and said, "You look like a cartoon with a crooked smile." The class laughed. And that was that. It stuck. Through middle school, into high school, even when I grew my hair long to hide the scars, even when my speech therapy improved my articulation, even when I started dressing more like the other girls and less, like someone's forgotten cousin from a children's hospital, the name lingered. I had one friend for a while. Her name was Liz. We met in 8th grade, bonded over our shared hatred of group projects. She had her own battles, anxiety mostly, and an alcoholic mom. We were the invisible girls, the broken ones. I thought we understood each other, until we didn't. In freshman year, she started hanging out with this group of girls. Cheer adjacent, I guess. Pretty, bored, hungry for drama. I watched Liz change slowly, like someone peeling off a skin she was ashamed of. I still remember the first time she laughed with them, and not at them when they called me robot leg. She didn't meet my eyes that day. She just looked away, and that hurt more than anything else. The thing is, when people think you're used to being mistreated, they stop pretending to be kind. They'll talk about you right in front of you, mock the way you walk, mimic your speech, toss their pity around like confetti, as if pity could substitute for respect. Even teachers sometimes did it. Not openly, but you could hear it in their tone. Claire tries her best. She's very sweet, just not very social. She's a little slow to answer, but she means well. I heard everything, even when I didn't respond, especially then. My high school had a hallway near the back entrance with metal lockers that creaked so loud they could make your teeth hurt. That's where I kept mine. Locker 182, bottom row. Always the bottom, because reaching up was harder for me. I'd kneel, grab my books, and hope no one walked by. Of course, someone always did. Sophomore year, someone started slipping notes into my locker. At first, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was something kind. A joke, a compliment, a surprise. But no, it was worse. Crude drawings, me with exaggerated limbs, crossed eyes, drool. One said, "If you can't walk straight, maybe stay on the floor." I didn't tell anyone. What would I say? That I was being bullied? That people made fun of me? That wasn't news to anyone. That was just Tuesday. So I learned to play small, to disappear inside myself. I'd get up early to make sure I caught the first bus and could sit alone. I avoided eye contact in the halls. I mastered the art of silent breathing, of walking with my eyes down. My steps timed to avoid sudden noise or movement. I became invisible on purpose, because it was safer than trying to be seen and getting crushed for it. And yet, part of me was always awake, watching, noticing who did what, who laughed, who looked uncomfortable and did nothing, who started it, who joined in, and, most importantly, who knew better and chose silence anyway. I stored all of it, and I remembered names, because I didn't want revenge back then. I wanted peace. I wanted to believe that one day, I'd leave it all behind. That college or adulthood or something would free me. But peace never came, because sometimes, the people who mock you don't stay in high school. Sometimes they grow up, get jobs, build lives, and carry the same cruelty into adulthood, just dressed in better clothes. And sometimes, they come back into your life when you least expect it. That's when everything changed. But that part, that comes later. They say high school doesn't define you, that once you graduate, you move on, grow up, become someone else. I believed that. God, I needed to believe that. After senior year, I left town. Small towns are only good for two things: trapping you or forcing you to escape. I was determined to escape. I got a scholarship, disability-related of course, and studied graphic design at a college 2 states over. It wasn't a big-name school, but it was mine. For the first time, no one knew my history. No one had heard me called Crooked Smile behind my back. I was just Claire. Quiet, maybe a little awkward, but new. And I started to breathe. At college, people didn't stare. At least not in the same way. They held doors open without making a big deal about it. Asked questions like I was a human, not a charity project. I even made friends, real ones. I learned to laugh again, to enjoy silences that weren't heavy, with judgment. For the first time, I felt like I was becoming someone, not just surviving. I graduated at 23, found an internship that led to a full-time job at a boutique design agency, moved into a tiny apartment with peeling paint and bad plumbing, but it was mine, and I loved it. My legs still gave me trouble some mornings, and my speech slipped when I was tired, but I handled it. No one mocked me. No one left notes. I thought I had finally outgrown the shadows. But then the email came. It was a Thursday morning. My inbox was flooded as usual. Project requests, client follow-ups, company announcements I never read. And there, buried in the middle, was one with a subject line that stopped me cold. Team expansion. Welcome our new project manager. I clicked it out of habit, not expectation, and saw his name. Tyler Morgan. My chest tightened before my brain could process it. The same Tyler who first called me Crooked Smile in 4th grade. The same boy whose voice haunted the edges of every memory I had of humiliation. The same smug face, now older, cleaned up in a corporate headshot with a blazer and forced smile. I stared at the screen for a full minute. The email praised his strong, interpersonal skills, his natural leadership, and decade of experience in client relations. I almost laughed. If cruelty was a transferable skill, then yeah, Tyler was probably an expert. Part of me wanted to forward the email to HR with a list of all the things he'd said to me growing up. But what would I write? Hi, just a heads up. This guy called me Crooked Smile for 10 years straight and once convinced a girl to trip me on crutches during a fire drill. Would they care? I didn't respond. I didn't do anything, really. I just waited. The following Monday, I saw him in person. I was standing by the elevator with a coffee I hadn't had time to drink yet. The doors opened, and there he was. Same face, just older. Beard now, a little more filled out. Wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked directly at me and smiled, a normal smile. Like a stranger might give you in an elevator, like he didn't recognize me. I felt the room spin. I didn't expect him to fall to his knees and beg forgiveness, but I thought, I don't know, something. Instead, he extended his hand. Hey there, Tyler Morgan. I think we're gonna be working together. Just like that. I stared at his hand, then at his face. There wasn't a flicker of recognition. I forced a polite smile, tight, like a seatbelt pulled too hard. Claire Whitmore, I said. Still nothing in his eyes. He nodded. Great to meet you, and walked past me. It hit me harder than any insult he'd ever thrown my way. It wasn't just that he'd bullied me for years. It was that I had memorized the weight of those memories, and he had forgotten me completely. I couldn't focus the rest of the day. My hand trembled every time I moved my mouse. I spilled tea on a design draft and had to reprint it twice. My coworker Jenna asked if I was sick. I said no. But I was. Not physically. Not exactly. I was sick with memory. With rage I thought I'd buried years ago. Because it's one thing to carry pain. It's another to realize the person who caused it didn't even keep the receipt. Over the next few weeks, Tyler integrated into the company like a virus. He smiled easily, made jokes in meetings, brought donuts on Fridays. The team loved him. People praised how charming he was, how approachable. Even my boss called him a real asset. And the worst part? He was good at it. He managed clients well, organized timelines like a machine, and always hit his deadlines. He was a professional, a grown-up, and it burned me. I tried to stay focused, head down, do my work. But every time I heard him laugh down the hall, something inside me twisted. Sometimes I wondered if I was crazy. Maybe he had changed. Maybe it wasn't fair to hold childhood mistakes against someone decades later. But then he'd say something, just subtle enough, that reminded me. Like when I mentioned in a team call that I was walking to a nearby cafe for lunch and he joked, "Hope the sidewalk doesn't bite back." No one laughed, but he smirked. That's when I knew. He remembered. He knew exactly who I was. He was just pretending not to. And that somehow was worse than anything he'd ever said to me as a kid. Because he was no longer a child. He was a man. He had power now, influence, the respect of people I worked with every day, and I was still her. The girl with the limp and the cautious voice and the crooked smile. But I wasn't helpless anymore. Not entirely. I had knowledge. I had access. And I had something I never had before. Time. And if there's one thing you learn when you grow up being underestimated, it's how to wait. From the outside, nothing had changed. Tyler was still the golden boy of the office. Still cracking jokes by the coffee machine. Still sending perfectly formatted meeting recaps. Still making everyone feel like they were lucky just to be in the same room. But I knew better now. He remembered. He knew exactly who I was, and he chose to pretend I was no one. And maybe that would have worked, if he'd left it at that. But Tyler wasn't content to just exist in the same space. No. He had to press his advantage, just like in school. Subtle digs, throwaway remarks, little power moves no one else would clock. But I did. Like the time he accidentally left me off the client update thread. And when I asked about it, he shrugged and said, "Oh, sorry. I didn't think you were looped in on the real strategy." Or the team lunch where he told a story about kids who milked their disabilities for attention and glanced at me mid-sentence, then smiled like he hadn't done anything. It was never enough to get him in trouble, never anything obvious. But I knew his rhythm, his tempo. I had danced to that music once, unwillingly. Not this time. This time, I chose the steps. I didn't respond. Didn't push back. Didn't even flinch. Instead, I studied. Every move he made, I started collecting. Data, innocently at first. Call notes, team memos, client feedback. I reviewed the shared drive for anything with his name. I read every email he sent out, every Slack message he posted. I even noted his lunch breaks, who he chatted with, and what time he left the office. It wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Tyler was good, but he was also arrogant. He liked to bend the rules just enough to make things work for him. He'd sign off on incomplete proposals, skip protocol when it suited him, push responsibilities down the chain, take credit when it went well, and quietly blame others when it didn't. I watched and waited. One Friday, I overheard him in the break room with Jenna. She was telling him about her sister's lupus diagnosis. Something raw and personal. Tyler, in his classic Tyler tone, chuckled and said, "Well, at least she's got a real illness. Nowadays everyone's got a syndrome or a limp and wants a trophy." He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. Stood frozen behind the hallway corner, hands clenched so tight my nails left marks in my palms. But I didn't cry. Didn't rage. Didn't march in and confront him. Because I had already begun to see this for what it was. A game only I could see. Everyone else still thought he was charming. But I had the real picture. And I was going to make sure everyone else saw it too. It wasn't about revenge. Not in the way people imagine it. I wasn't going to slash his tires or post angry rants online. No. I wanted something quieter, cleaner, permanent. I wanted to strip him of the thing he wore like a crown, his reputation. But to do that, I needed more than instincts. I needed proof. So, I got organized. I created a private folder on my home drive. Morgan Audit. Inside, I started documenting everything. Screenshots, audio recordings from meetings, legal in my state, notes on inconsistencies in his reports, comparisons between what he said and what actually got delivered. And then I got lucky. One Monday morning, while finalizing slides for a new client pitch, I noticed something strange. Tyler's deck had lifted entire sections from a competitor's website. Word for word, I double-checked, ran a plagiarism scan. 94% match. I stared at the results, heart pounding. This wasn't just laziness, it was theft. And it was traceable. But I didn't forward it. Not yet. Instead, I saved it, tagged it, added it to the archive. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't a reaction. It's a strategy. And my strategy had just shifted. From passive observation to active dismantling. Over the next few weeks, I kept feeding the archive. One of his monthly reports showed time logged on a campaign that had been canceled weeks before. A sloppy error, or maybe not. I pulled time card records, took screenshots of Slack conversations, built a timeline. Another time, he spoke over a junior designer in a meeting, shot down her idea, and then presented the exact same concept as his own the following week. I encouraged her to resubmit it with her name. Quietly let our manager know. She'd pitched it days before. Didn't mention Tyler, just dropped a breadcrumb. A week later, she got the credit. Tyler looked rattled in the meeting. Just for a second. It was small, but it felt right. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me anymore. Tyler was still the same person who thrived by making others smaller. He hadn't grown. He'd just changed his mask. And no one could see what he was doing, because bullies don't always punch you in the face. Sometimes they smile while cutting your knees out from under you. But I wasn't the scared girl in the cafeteria anymore. I wasn't going to limp away from this. I was going to make him fall. Not with noise, not with confrontation, but with clarity. I was building the case, quietly, patiently, like an architect designing the perfect collapse. All I needed was the final piece. And soon, he would hand it to me himself. I'd been watching Tyler's moves like a hawk for months by this point, cataloging every slip-up, every careless act masked as charm or incompetence. But even with all my research, I knew I had to be patient. Revenge was a game of timing, and Tyler was about to hand me the moment I'd been waiting for. It was a Thursday afternoon when it happened. The day started like any other. Emails, meetings, the usual office buzz. But Tyler was prepping for something big. A presentation. To a potential client that could land the company a lucrative contract. I knew he was nervous. The confidence he usually wore like armor felt thin that morning. His usual jokes were forced, his smile too wide, and he kept checking his phone. I didn't have to dig to know why. The client was known for being meticulous, a tough crowd. The morning passed, then the afternoon, then the conference room filled. Tyler took the floor. He started strong, smooth voice, polished slides. But then, somewhere halfway through, the cracks began to show. His presentation software froze. He stumbled over his words. And then, the biggest mistake, the one that would break everything open. He presented outdated data, not just slightly old numbers, but figures from a year ago. Figures that no one in the room could ignore. I saw the clients' faces. Confusion, doubt, then frustration. I watched Tyler try to recover, smile plastered on his face, voice rising in desperation. But the damage was done. Later, when the meeting ended in polite but clear rejection, the air around Tyler changed. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Back at my desk, I watched as whispers spread like wildfire, colleagues exchanging glances, managers sharing concerned looks. Tyler was alone, vulnerable. And that's when I knew it was time to move. I had my evidence, my proof. But now, with this public failure, I could bring everything together. I sent a carefully worded email to HR, anonymous, but with attachments, screenshots, timelines, copied correspondence. I didn't say much, just the facts, clear and cold. Within days, HR opened an investigation. Tyler's mask was cracking. He was no longer untouchable. At first, he denied everything, the usual gaslighting tactics. There must be a mistake. I don't know what this is about. But the evidence was overwhelming. I stayed silent through it all. Watching, waiting, knowing that his fall wasn't just about me, but about all the small victims he'd left in his wake. When HR finally confronted him, Tyler's arrogance broke. He was forced to explain, to admit errors he'd tried so hard to hide. I didn't celebrate, because this wasn't about victory. It was about justice. And in that moment, I realized something important. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet moments, the patient building of truth, that speak the loudest. After HR stepped in, the atmosphere around Tyler shifted in a way I hadn't fully anticipated. The office was quieter, more cautious. People exchanged wary looks but avoided confrontation. The golden boy was no longer golden. He was fragile, exposed. But the real game was just beginning, because Tyler, despite all his arrogance, was a fighter. He wasn't about to go down without a fight. His first move was to rally his allies. Quiet whispers turned into defensive emails, side meetings, subtle attempts to undermine my credibility. Rumors started circulating. Claire's just bitter. She's looking for attention. It's all hearsay. I felt the pressure, the isolation, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I knew that to truly win, I had to turn the tables, in a way he never saw coming. Instead of pushing back with anger, I chose a different path. Patience and precision. I began quietly supporting the colleagues Tyler had sidelined or disrespected. I checked in with the junior designer whose idea Tyler had stolen, helped her prepare a formal presentation for the next team meeting. I reached out to the assistants who had been ignored or spoken down to, encouraging them to document their experiences. I fostered an informal network of voices, people who wanted change but felt powerless. Meanwhile, I kept feeding HR updates, always factual, always measured. Each new piece of evidence I provided strengthened the case. Tyler's arrogance turned to desperation. I could see it in his eyes, the way he avoided me in the hallways, the forced smiles, the clipped tone when we crossed paths. But his mistakes were mounting. He missed deadlines, lost key clients, and most damaging of all, he was caught lying. During the investigation, the final blow came during a departmental meeting. Our manager announced a restructuring. Tyler would be reassigned to a less influential role, pending further review. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness, relief that justice was being served, sadness for how far it had come, for the damage done to so many. But through it all, I remained silent. No grand gestures, no dramatic confrontations, just quiet persistence. Because revenge doesn't need to shout to be heard. It just needs to be done right. And in the end, Tyler's empire crumbled. Not with noise, but with truth. The moment Tyler was officially removed from his position, a strange silence settled over the office. Not the kind of silence that screams relief or celebration, but a calm that only comes when a long storm finally passes. It wasn't about gloating. It wasn't about rubbing salt in wounds. It was the quiet satisfaction of justice, long overdue, finally served. I remember sitting at my desk that morning, feeling the weight of everything lift a little. The tension in my shoulders eased. My heart no longer raced every time I heard his name whispered in the hall. But even then, I knew this wasn't the end. Tyler had left scars, on people, on the culture, on me. Trust had been broken. The wounds wouldn't heal overnight. So I made a choice to rebuild. First, I reached out to the people who had been hurt the most, the ones whose voices had been drowned out by Tyler's arrogance. I offered my support, not out of pity, but because we deserved to be heard. We deserved respect. Together, we began pushing for real change, clear policies against bullying, anonymous reporting systems, workshops about respect and inclusion. And slowly, the office began to feel different, safer, kinder, more human. I watched colleagues smile again without hesitation. Meetings became more collaborative, less competitive, and Tyler? Well, he was a reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked. But the most important thing I learned was about myself. I realized that my disability, once a source of shame and silence, was also a source of strength. The same resilience I'd built fighting Tyler's cruelty was the same strength that carried me through every challenge in life. Revenge had been a path, but healing was the real destination. And I found peace not in shouting back, but in standing, tall and silent, knowing I had won on my own terms. I hope my story helps others who feel powerless, that they understand. Sometimes the greatest victories don't need noise. They need patience, courage, and unwavering faith in the truth. Thank you for listening. Months passed after Tyler's departure, and the office began to feel like a different place. One where respect wasn't just a buzzword, but a reality. But for me, the biggest changes were happening inside. I started to embrace my disability, not as a limitation but as a part of who I was, a part that shaped my resilience, my empathy, and my perspective. I took on new projects, volunteered to lead initiatives supporting accessibility and inclusivity, and found myself becoming a voice for those who still felt unseen. The colleagues who once avoided me now sought my advice, admired my calm strength in the face of adversity. I never sought the spotlight, but it found me anyway, and with that came an unexpected opportunity. Our company decided to launch a mentoring program for employees with disabilities. I was asked to lead it. At first, I hesitated. Could I really be that person for others? The one to guide them through challenges I knew all too well? But then I realized, if I could stand up against someone like Tyler, then I could definitely help someone else find their own strength. The program flourished. Stories were shared, bonds were built, and slowly but surely, a community formed. On a personal level, I also started to reclaim parts of my life I had set aside: friendships, hobbies, and even love. I met people who didn't see my disability as a flaw, but as a unique thread in the tapestry of who I was. It wasn't perfect, and there were days when doubts crept in. But I was no longer silent, and neither was my story. Looking back, I know my revenge was never about hurting Tyler. It was about reclaiming my dignity and proving that silence isn't weakness. It can be power. Now, every time I walk through the office, I see the difference that one person's courage can make. And I hope this story reminds you, even when you feel silenced or underestimated, your truth matters. Your quiet strength can shake the world. Years have passed since that painful chapter in my life. The bullying, the struggle, the quiet fight for justice. And sometimes, I catch myself thinking about how far I've come. I'm Claire Whitmore, now 35 years old, and I'm no longer the person who hid her disability, who swallowed insults, who felt powerless in a room full of loud voices. The silence I kept back then wasn't weakness. It was strategy. It was the calm before the storm, and the storm changed everything. But what's more important is what came after. The legacy I want to leave isn't just about revenge. It's about resilience, empowerment, and hope. I've seen firsthand how silence can be a weapon, not to hurt others, but to protect yourself until you're ready to stand. I've learned that real strength isn't about shouting the loudest or striking the hardest. It's about knowing when to wait, when to listen, and when to act. That's the message I want to share with anyone out there who feels mocked, underestimated, or invisible. You are not alone. You are not powerless. Your silence can be your greatest power, because when you're ready, your truth will speak louder than any insult ever could, and the world will have no choice but to listen. Thank you for hearing my story.